Hello, and welcome to the Prove It Testing Strategy course. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm so excited to show you all of the resources within this one strategy. And the strategy is called Prove. The reason it's called Prove is because each letter stands for a certain step in the process that students will use to tackle any multiple choice question, whether it's reading, revising, or editing. Whatever it is, this gives them a framework and a process, a way to think. And that's what I've got for my subheading here, teaching students how to think first and what to think about second. So many teachers I talk to, they have these great lessons on key idea and supporting details, and then they give students a test at the end of the week, a little assessment, see how we're doing, did we raise our data, and they fail what we spent all week practicing and what teachers spend so much time preparing a lesson for. It's because sometimes students, they just miss that connection of what is the question really asking me. Oh, how should I be reading that passage with a specific purpose in mind? I'm going to get into all that. I'm already trying to jump into it. I'm excited to talk about this, but a little bit about me first. So my name is Brittany McKay. I am the owner and founder of In Between the Lattes. I come from where that arrow is pointing, right there between Dallas and Fort Worth in Texas here. And a little bit about my background. I taught middle school for 7 years, moved down to elementary to gain a broader experience. And then I did summer school, high school for a few years there as well, just trying to get my hands on several grade levels. And the reason I did that because I wanted to get into curriculum and instruction. And so after those years in the classroom and teaching summer school at as many grade levels as I could reach, I moved into my district's curriculum position where I help support teachers with professional development, writing and managing curriculum, etc. And that was so much fun for me because not only was I just creating content that would affect my students in my classroom, but then I was seeing it spread across a district, and I've seen the success and the relief and the time I was saving teachers, and by creating some of those resources. And then, I found myself wanting to expand even past that. And I started talking to other districts and doing trainings for them and realized, okay, I can't be all in on one district and do run out here and there. And so I decided to step away and start my own business with curriculum consulting, resource design, all the things. And it's been just such a joy. My favorite thing is what I'm doing now, and I'm so excited to be able to share with you some of these resources that I've found to be so successful, not just with my students in my classroom, not just when I pushed it out to my district, but even across the state and even the U.S. So that's a little bit about me, about my education background, my professional background there. You've got my email address, but you can also reach out to me through this course as well. But please reach out with any questions you have, follow-up resources, etc. So, okay, here's a quote I like to start, especially with this training. I like to start with all my trainings, but this one especially applies to what we're going to be talking about throughout this course. And it's in a book that I recently read and just loved because the book touches on things that just aren't as common in some ideas that aren't as common in our world today. We often hear, you just got to believe in yourself and you're going to achieve it. And sometimes our students, they think it's that easy and that turnkey that, oh, if I want it, I've got it. It's, almost instant gratification. But this quote here, it says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." And so just because we show up to STAR and we are saying, okay, I'm going to try today, I'm going to give it my all, doesn't mean we're going to pass it just because we want it in that moment. It's what did you put in place each day up until then? And was it the right kind of ideas, and were they the right kind of systems and processes? And students aren't going to develop those on their own naturally. Most 99.9% of the time, you might have a student here or there that you're like, oh, that's a really good idea. Let's all do it. But other than that, students need to be shown how to think through these questions. They need a process that they sit down to any test and say, okay, I know my step one, what I'm going to do to answer these questions. And so this is a quote, like I said, that I really frame a lot of my instructional philosophy around, because there are things that we want to practice. There's ways that we can burn out our students if it's just failing another test, and here's another one, and here's another test, and here's another test. But if we're actually thinking through those questions in a really constructive way and with a process and a system, we are giving students tools to change it. If they are just given test after test and failing test after test, nothing's going to change if nothing changes. And so that's what this strategy does. And so that's that's where my thinking comes from for all this. But here's a little bit more of the why, and I'm going to move my video here so you can see. I like my GIF here. This boy is adorable. I'm guessing his teacher said, "Okay, read through these pages and remember what you read," or maybe they've got a test coming up or whatever, and he's coming up with his own process to retain that information, scooping up the information and putting it in his head. If we don't show students a specific way or give them tools to approach those questions, sometimes they come up with their mystical ideas of how to do that. Might not quite look like this GIF, but they do need provided those resources. So here, why does strategy exist? Why does PROVE exist? It's because students need that clear direction with annotating. If you say, you hand students a passage and you say, okay, why don't we annotate today? Who knows what's going to go on that page? It's, maybe there's constructive notes. Maybe we're highlighting and you ask them, why do you highlight that? And you're like, oh, that's not exactly what I was going for. Maybe they highlight nothing or they highlight everything. And so we have to give that direction. Students need a consistent process for answering those multiple choice questions. It's such a huge part of the test. I know the writing is new. It can feel new. It's been around for a few years, but those multiple choice questions really are such a huge percentage of the test that students need those tools to approach that. It's such if they can't get those questions correct, or they've missed so many of those questions that could so easily be answered correctly, that could be the difference between passing and failing. It's also, again, I like to think beyond just the test with this strategy and just think, how do we think through and break down thinking? How do we make visible thinking? So again, we'll get into all this, but that is where the strategy comes from. And then finally, students need to understand the importance for reading with a purpose, reading for a job versus reading for pleasure. I'd always tell students that, if we were reading for fun, we'd be reading way better things. Here, you've got a passage, or we've got STAR, or whatever it is. We've got a test coming up, and we're reading for a purpose. We're reading for a job. Again, I know we're talking about the test and we're talking about testing, but what I'm hoping to equip students with is, how do you think with a process? How do you follow directions? Whether it's a boss someday giving you specific directions, whether it's the task at hand, which is reading this passage for a specific purpose, how do you conquer that? How do you tackle that? And that's what I really want to emphasize throughout this training too, is reading for a purpose, for the right reason, and as a job, helping students view it that way. This is your job right now, is being a student and answering those questions and doing that correctly. And so how do you work hard at that? And so that's where we're going. Another huge why. Let me go to my next slide here. What is the benefit of visible thinking? So many benefits, but I've got just a paper test here, and this is, we've got strategy on one, the strategy I'm about to talk to you about, and then, maybe what a lot of your tests come back from your students looking like, which is blank, but maybe they've got answers circled, but maybe that's about it. Well, what's the value? What's the benefit in visible thinking? I mean, think about this student here, where we see the thinking, we see where they're highlighting text evidence and annotating and showing their proof behind what they're choosing. They're giving an answer and a defense for the answers they're choosing or not choosing. These are conversations. I can have a conversation with a student if they said, "Oh, I found question 21 right here." And I say, "Oh, okay. Well, I can understand why you might have thought that, but it actually shows up in this paragraph here." Whatever that conversation might be, but that is a conversation. If I receive a test from a student that looks like this with just answers circled, I put the grade on it. You got one correct, 33. There you go. It's back to you, and try again next week. That's about all I can do. I mean, I could ask, and they might remember what they were thinking, 5 days ago or 3 days ago, but probably not. And even if it were in the moment, it's still not necessarily holding them accountable for the job at hand, which is to answer that question. So one, it gives students direction and tools, but also creates those conversations that you can have with students based off of their answers and showing their work. I mean, we do this in math all the time. Students are used to showing their work in math, and reading and revising and editing same way. ELA, we can still show our thinking. It's important that we show our thinking. Again, especially we're not reading this passage for fun. And maybe it's interesting, maybe not. It's a STAR passage. We're reading this for a job, and so it's got to look like we've put in that work to it. Everything I'm going to show you transfers to online. I love, and I'll talk about this, I love starting on paper, but it's got to move to online at some point. And in fact, constantly, as maybe it's all throughout the year. It's not just that we start with paper and then we cut it off and it's all online, but it's maybe introduced on paper. Again, that's just my personal preference, and I'll tell you more why throughout the course. And then we go to online, and then we switch back to paper. And some things are paper, some things are Google Forms, some things are online Cambium platform. Whatever it is, that thinking needs to stay consistent. And again, that's something I'll continue to emphasize throughout this course, is keeping that thinking consistent, not switching it up and saying, "Oh yeah, we only show good thinking on some work." No, we practice perfect, and it's putting in that effort, showing that thinking, holding students accountable for that thinking, no matter what assignment it is. Even if there's no multiple choice question involved, I'll also talk about what that might look like as well. So here's what it looks like on the STAR platform. Same kind of prove thinking. Again, this might not be what your students' tests look like if you were to go and be able to look at their STAR work. It might look a lot like this. I mean, this student is probably the one who clicks and might be done in an hour and a half for a 4 or 5 hour test. This is a student that they're really pacing themselves to make sure that they have the time to finish, before the day's up, or that time is up for them. And so this is again something we want them to work hard at during the test. When it keeps them awake, keeps them thinking. It would help me as well. In fact, when I took my certification test, I remember I got an additional certification after having already been in the classroom teaching Prove, and I went through and I was just reading and just clicking like this. This is what my test looked like, and I thought, wow, I'm doing the opposite of what I've told my students to do, and I'm having to read this passage a couple times. There was a passage, reading comprehension questions, and I went back and I thought, okay, I'm going to preview the questions. I'm going to actually take a note here while I'm answering these questions, and actually applying what I'm teaching. And it made such a difference. One, got those answers. I'm sure those were more accurate responses from myself, and then it saved me time too. And that's what I want students to see, is the why behind this strategy. It's not just, hey, I'm making you work harder just because I want you to work harder. I want you to be a hard worker. Well, sure, that might be a good, you want to encourage students to work hard, but we want them to see the why behind it. Why do we do each of these steps? So a lot of background, a lot of just behind the scenes, the why behind the strategy, my thinking behind it, the purpose behind it. I'll talk more, I might repeat myself with some of these ideas throughout these other videos throughout the course, but it's really some of the points I want to drive home with it. It's a strategy that I've found to be a true game changer, so valuable, and just have those long term effects of teaching students how to be good thinkers and approach any passage. So I'm excited. I'll see you in the other videos, and I'm excited to share all these resources with you. And yeah, let's get going. Let's go to the next one.